The Last Soldier. The extraordinary 29-year war of Hiroo Onoda. A war that refused to end. Picture this. It's March 1974. Richard Nixon is embroiled in Watergate, his presidency crumbling under the weight of scandal. The Vietnam War has just ended, leaving America exhausted and divided. Bell-bottoms and disco are taking over the world. ABBA has just won Eurovision with Waterloo. Young people are protesting, experimenting, rejecting the old ways. The Beatles broke up 4 years ago. The world has moved on from World War II. That conflict is ancient history, something their parents fought in, something that belongs in black and white photographs and dusty textbooks. And on a remote Philippine island called Lubang, a Japanese soldier is still fighting World War II. His name was Hiroo Onoda, and he had been at war for 29 years, 7 months, and 18 days after everyone else had gone home. While the world transformed around him, while empires fell and rose, while humanity reached the moon and split the atom, while entire generations were born and came of age, he remained in the jungle, rifle in hand, carrying out orders given to him when Franklin Roosevelt was still President of the United States. This isn't a tale of madness or delusion, though it might be easier to understand if it were. This is something far more complex and far more disturbing. It's a story about loyalty, duty, and the terrifying power of an order that cannot be questioned. It's about what happens when a man's sense of honor becomes so absolute that reality itself cannot penetrate it. And perhaps most disturbing of all, it's a story about how the very qualities we admire most, dedication, perseverance, unwavering commitment, can transform into something tragically destructive. Before we judge Hiroo Onoda too harshly, we must understand something. He was not an aberration. He was, in many ways, the perfect product of his time and culture, a man who embodied the values he was taught so completely that he couldn't recognize when those values had become obsolete. His story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about ourselves. What would we refuse to believe? What orders would we continue following long after they made sense? What wars do we fight in our own minds long after everyone else has declared peace? The making of a perfect soldier. To understand Hiroo Onoda, you must first understand the Japan of the 1940s, a nation that had transformed itself with breathtaking speed from an isolated feudal society into a modern industrial power. Born in 1922 in Wakayama Prefecture, Onoda came of age in an empire intoxicated by militarism and the ancient samurai code of Bushido. But this wasn't the genuine Bushido of feudal Japan. This was a manufactured ideology, carefully crafted by the military government to create the perfect soldiers. The Japan of Onoda's youth was a pressure cooker of contradictions. On one hand, it was a modern nation with factories, universities, and a powerful navy. On the other, it was steeped in an almost religious devotion to the emperor, considered a living god, and to ideals of honor that hadn't changed in centuries. Children were taught that Japan was destined to lead Asia, that Western powers were decadent and weak, that death in service to the emperor was the highest achievement a person could aspire to. Surrender was not merely discouraged, it was the ultimate disgrace, worse than death itself. Japanese soldiers were taught that if they were captured, their families would be shamed. Their names would be struck from family registers. They would become non-persons. Better to die fighting, or better yet, to take your own life, than to suffer the humiliation of capture. This wasn't just military doctrine. It was woven into the fabric of society. Mothers told their sons they would rather receive a notice of death than hear they had surrendered. Young Hiroo Onoda absorbed all of this. He was not a particularly militaristic youth. In fact, he had initially trained to work in his family's business. But when conscription came in 1942, as the tide of World War II began turning against Japan, 20-year-old Onoda did what was expected of him. He reported for duty, ready to serve his emperor and his nation. But Onoda wasn't destined to be just another soldier in a trench or on a battleship. His intelligence, his attention to detail, and his unwavering dedication caught the attention of his superiors. In 1944, he was selected for something special, an elite commando training school at Nakano, located near Tokyo. The Nakano School was unlike any other military institution in Japan. While regular soldiers were trained for conventional warfare, charging enemy positions, manning artillery, dying bravely in massive battles, Nakano trained its students for something far more subtle and far more enduring. They learned guerrilla warfare, intelligence gathering, sabotage, and unconventional combat. They were taught how to survive behind enemy lines indefinitely, living off the land, moving unseen, striking without warning. But more than tactical skills, Nakano taught a particular mindset. The instructors drilled into their students a profound distrust of everything and everyone except their direct orders. They were taught that the enemy would use psychological warfare, fake documents, forged letters, propaganda broadcasts. They were shown examples of Allied leaflets claiming victories that hadn't happened, of messages supposedly from Japanese commanders ordering surrender that were actually enemy fabrications. The curriculum included detailed lessons on how to identify propaganda. They learned that the enemy would become increasingly sophisticated, that forgeries would improve over time, that the psychological pressure to give up would be immense. They were taught to question everything except their core mission. One lesson was repeated again and again, drilled into the students until it became as automatic as breathing. Never surrender. Never give up. Your mission continues until your commanding officer personally relieves you of duty. Everything else, rumors of defeat, leaflets announcing peace, even messages claiming to be from the emperor himself, could be enemy deception. Must be viewed with suspicion, should be assumed false until proven otherwise through proper channels. For Hiroo Onoda, these weren't just instructions. They were the foundation of his identity as a soldier. The instructors at Nakano had given him a framework for understanding the world, a set of rules that would guide his actions. And unlike many students who might have internalized these lessons partially or with some skepticism, Onoda absorbed them completely. He became, in a very real sense, exactly what the Nakano School was designed to create. A soldier who could not be broken, could not be deceived, and could not be convinced to surrender. Years later, Onoda would reflect on his training and realize something profound. The very qualities that made Nakano graduates such effective intelligence officers, their skepticism, their paranoia, their refusal to accept information at face value, also made them uniquely vulnerable to becoming trapped in a mission that no longer existed. The school had created soldiers who were too perfect, too committed, too unwilling to question their core assumptions. But in 1944, as Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda graduated from Nakano School, none of that was apparent. He was simply a well-trained officer, ready to serve, ready to do his duty, ready to follow orders no matter what.